settle in. Find a comfortable position, whether you're resting under warm blankets or simply drifting on the edge of sleep. Allow your mind to grow soft at the edges, ready to wander across distant plains and under a vast, open sky. Tonight, we travel far back in time, to a place where the wind whispers over endless grasslands, where herds of hardy horses graze under drifting clouds, and where a simple felt tent could be home to an entire family and an empire. You are about to slip quietly into the hidden world of the Mongol camp. The quiet routines, the quiet hardships, the quiet strength that once thundered across continents, yet always began and ended here, among the gently grazing herds and flickering campfires. In this long, unhurried journey, we will explore not only the daily life of a Mongol warrior in camp, but also the lives of the people who built, supported, and sustained one of the largest land empires the world has ever known. We will meet khans and queens, follow couriers across the steppe, sit by shamans whispering to the sky, and drift over ruins half buried by time and grass. So, breathe deeply. Feel the vast silence of the steppe surround you, and let us begin together at the heart of it all, the Mongol camp. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn inside a small, round ger, a felted tent that holds the warmth of the family through the cold Mongolian night. The air inside is thick with the faint smell of wood smoke and the musky scent of horses drifting in through the flap. Outside, the frost clings to the grass like a fine dusting of sugar. You sit up on a hard felt mat, your cloak wrapped tightly around your shoulders. The floor beneath you is hard-packed earth, covered with woven rugs that soften the chill only a little. In the dim half-light, you hear the gentle shift of hooves outside. The horses, your lifeline, waiting to be fed and saddled. In the Mongol camp, every dawn begins like this, simple, cold, unchanged for generations. Life here is built on constant movement and careful routine. The ger, though humble, can be taken down, loaded onto carts, and rebuilt within hours. A mobile home for a people who follow the grass, the seasons, and the promise of water. The first task is always the animals. You step out into the dawn. The steppe stretches flat and endless before you, a sea of yellowed grass waving gently in the wind. You and your kin check the herd, horses, sheep, perhaps a few goats, the sound of their low calls blending into the breeze. You run your hand over your lead horse's thick winter coat, feel its warmth. Mongol horses are small, sturdy, and sure-footed, able to graze on tough grasses and survive brutal winds. Without them, there is no camp, no travel, no war. Each family depends on its herd as much as it depends on the sky. Breakfast is plain: fermented mare's milk, hard curds of dried cheese, perhaps a strip of mutton if supplies are good. The taste is sharp, sour, and fills your stomach just enough to keep the cold at bay. Fires are small, the fuel precious, dried dung, carefully gathered and stored. Smoke drifts lightly through the open roof of the ger, a slow spiral that disappears into the sky. There is no village here, no stone walls. The steppe is a village, all its own, spread thin, connected by kinship ties, watched over by the ever-present horses and the vast silence. You might see another family's camp in the distance, white dots on the plain. Or you might go weeks without any sign of neighbors. When the sun is fully up, daily chores take shape: tending animals, mending tack and saddles, sewing felt covers for the gear, preparing food that can travel well. Every object is practical, portable, built to serve a people, always ready to move with the wind. The elders tell old stories by the fires at night, tales of how your people came to rule the world, but also simple wisdom, how to read the clouds for snow, how to find water where none seems to flow, how to greet a stranger in the vast emptiness, inside the gare, warmth and closeness, outside the wind and the horizon that never ends. This is the hidden truth of the Mongol camp. It is neither grand nor savage, but steady, practical, and shaped by an endless land that asks its people to listen more than to conquer. As the day moves forward, the riders gather, warriors young and old, training their horses, practicing the bow, tending the herd that binds them to life itself. The same men who can thunder across empires begin every day here, crouched by a simple fire, sipping sour milk, under a sky bigger than any kingdom. And so the rhythm repeats, the hum of hoofbeats, the warmth of wool, the flicker of flame, the breath of the steppe. You stand here now, half a world away from stone cities and stone walls. The wind moves over you, and for a moment, you are simply part of the camp, just another figure beneath the endless sky. As the daylight grows stronger, you watch the camp come to life, though life here never truly sleeps. Even at night, someone watches the herd, listening for wolves, or the distant sound of hooves that do not belong. This vigilance is part of the quiet rhythm that holds the camp together, the silent agreement that everyone, young and old, plays their part. Nearby, an older woman kneels to shape fresh dung into flat, round patties for drying, fuel for the hearth that must never go out. A boy chases a wayward goat, his laughter carried on the wind for a moment before it fades into the hush of the plain. A young girl helps her mother mend a tear in the thick felt covering the gore. Neat, practiced stitches that keep the cold from slipping in. The smell of horse sweat, the faint temps of milk fermenting in a leather bag, the crackle of a small cooking fire. All these scents blend with the crisp, dry air that drifts in from every direction. There are no tall trees here to block the wind. The only shelter is what you carry with you, what you build again and again, wherever the grass is good. Outside the camp's ring, a line of horses stands tied together, their manes tangled from a night in the open. Some stamp their hooves, snorting steam into the cold air. One by one, they will be checked. Hooves scraped clean, girths tightened, blankets brushed down. Each animal is a companion as much as a tool. A Mongol's life depends on the health of the herd. Without the horse, the plain would swallow a man whole. A little distance away, a lone figure sits cross-legged on the grass, bow across his knees, eyes half closed against the rising sun. He sits so still that the horses do not flinch near him. In time, he will rise, mount, and ride out alone, a single dark dot, moving across an ocean of pale gold. He might be hunting for stray sheep, or scouting for signs of other camps, or simply watching the wind and sky as his ancestors did. This is how the Mongol camp breathes, in and out with the wind. There is no stone wall to shield you from what comes. The sky is your ceiling, the earth your floor. The felted gur is your fragile heartbeat against the open plain. Inside, the walls hold the warmth of family. Outside, the wind tests you every day, every season. Sometimes the camp moves, a quiet, careful migration. folding the life you know into neat bundles that are tied to the backs of sturdy oxen or packed onto carts pulled by shaggy ponies. The place you called home yesterday will be only an empty circle of flattened grass tomorrow. Nothing is wasted. Not a scrap of wool, not a sliver of wood, not a drop of milk. And so you drift through the hours, tending animals, checking tack, patching boots. You learn the sky's moods, how to read the sweep of dark clouds on the far edge of sight, how to feel the cold shift that means snow is near. There is no clock here but the sun's slow arc and the whisper of grass bowing before the wind. When dusk falls, smoke rises gently from the juror's smoke hole once again. Inside, voices murmur, old stories told in soft tones. Outside, the horses settle down, their silhouettes quiet against the pale band of sky. The hush deepens. You feel it wrap around you like a blanket, and if you listen closely, you might hear the soft footfalls of the past, the quiet beginnings of the thunder that would someday shake empires awake. This is the hidden truth of the Mongol camp. A world shaped by silence and wind, a life at once harsh and gentle, fragile and unstoppable, where each dawn looks much the same, and yet no 2 days are ever truly alike. As you settle more deeply into this drifting steppe of memory, imagine that same camp, the same thin smoke rising, the same circle of felt tents beneath a restless sky. But now picture it, almost 1,000 years ago, when a boy named Temujin lay awake at night, listening to the breath of the wind against the Gare walls. Temujin, the boy who would become Genghis Khan. A name still spoken with wonder and unease in distant corners of the world, did not inherit an empire. He was not born among jeweled walls or stone palaces. He was born to the same harsh dawns you have just felt. He was a child of the wind, the horse, and the wide-open plain. In the early years, there was only hardship. Imagine yourself in that younger camp. A boy's eyes scanning the dark for raiders who might steal horses in the night. Or worse, Temujin's father was poisoned by rivals. His family was left abandoned by their own clan, forced to scrape together scraps of food in the frozen grasslands. They boiled roots. They set traps for small animals. They learned early that survival was not a gift, it was a daily trial. Yet the rhythm of the steppe shaped him, the endless horizon, the hush of snowfall at dawn, the stubborn life of the horse herds that kept moving forward no matter how cold the wind blew. Where another might have drifted into obscurity, Temujin watched, listened, and remembered old feuds. He bound loyal friends to him with bonds stronger than fear. The Anda, the sworn brotherhood of the steppe. He learned that no man could command the wind alone, but that men together could ride with it, harness it, turn it into a force stronger than any fortress wall. He gathered those castes aside, orphans, outcasts, broken families. He offered them the promise of a new tribe, built not on old bloodlines, but on loyalty and skill. In this, Temujin was both deeply traditional and quietly revolutionary. A man who rose from a simple tent to unite the quarrelsome tribes of the steppe under one banner. Picture him now. No crown, no gilded throne, just a thick fur coat, a battered bow across his lap, a hard-eyed gaze that sees farther than most dare to dream. At night, he sits by the fire with his men. Men who once rode against each other, now bound together by the quiet certainty that he will lead them where the grass is greener, where the herds grow fat, where enemies who once mocked them will kneel or be swept away. The chronicles written by those who feared him often speak of storms and slaughter. But here, among his own, there is another side, the steady voice by the campfire, the man who knew when to wait out the wind, who listened to his mother's lessons about kinship and cunning. Even the harshest conqueror was once a boy who carried water for his family, who rode bareback under the same endless sky. Temujin's gift was not the sword alone, but the mind that never rested. He learned quickly, take the best ideas from every people he met. He borrowed siege engines from the Chinese, scribes from Persia, goldsmiths from the cities of the Silk Road. Yet he always returned to the camp, to the felt walls that could be packed away in a single day. The circle of horses, the circle of trusted guards who slept beside him on the open plain. The man who would become Genghis Khan, universal ruler, was crowned not in marble halls but beneath a vast blue sky, with the grass beneath his boots and the wind lifting the banners high. His empire began not with walls but with riders, each sworn to one another, each carrying his words further than any messenger had ever dared before. When you imagine the roar of the Mongol horsemen sweeping across Asia, remember to the quiet moments that made it possible. A single boy awake at night, listening to the soft, restless sigh of the wind across the steppe. So much thunder began in silence. So much fire was born in the cold hush before dawn. Now, as our thoughts drift forward, let us follow the traces he left behind to the ancient city that rose as his first true capital, hidden under centuries of grass and dust. Breathe in the cold, dry air of that ancient camp. Imagine the flickering campfire, sparks rising into a sky so dark and wide it seems to swallow the world whole. Around the fire, warriors sit close, knees drawn up, cloaks pulled tight. Their horses stand just beyond the circle of warmth, heads lowered, tails flicking gently against the night's chill. Among them sits Temujin, no longer a boy, but not yet the ruler whose name would echo from the Pacific to the gates of Europe. His face is lean from years of hunger. His eyes are steady, dark as the night around him. His hands rest lightly on the bough laid across his lap, the same kind of bough you might have felt in your own hands just moments ago, under this endless sky. The men around him listen as he speaks, his voice never raised, but carrying clear in the hush. He speaks of old grudges, of broken promises, of how the clans tear each other apart for scraps, while richer kingdoms on the edges of the steppe grow fat and soft behind their stone walls. He speaks of unity, of binding horse to horse, bough to bough, heart to heart. No grand declarations, no loud threats. The next day they ride out together, a small band. At first they move as the herds move, appearing and vanishing into the sea of grass. When they come upon rivals, they do not always draw swords. Sometimes they sit and talk. Sometimes they trade. Sometimes they wait for old enemies to become new friends. When hunger and ambition push one chief to betray another, the steppe is patient. Slowly, his circle grows, from a handful of loyal riders to dozens, then hundreds. His childhood friends, brothers by vow, become his generals, bound by trust more than blood. He knows each man's strength and weakness. He rewards loyalty quickly, punishes betrayal without spectacle, but with certainty. The rhythm of the camp teaches this. Survival favors those who act with quiet purpose. Stories drift ahead of them like campfire smoke. Others whisper that he carries the storm in his saddlebag. But the truth is simpler and stronger. He understands people. He understands that fear can be turned loyalty can be won, and that the greatest force is not the horse beneath him, but the bond that ties his followers together like woven horsehair rope. He does not call himself Genghis Khan yet. That title will come later, a gift from the steppe itself, when all the wandering tribes, tired of fighting among themselves, gather at a great Kurultai, a council under the open sky, and raise him up, not with a jeweled crown, but with the voices of men who once called him enemy. Imagine that day, thousands gathered on the plain, their horses grazing in vast rings around felt tents and fluttering banners, the air thick with the smell of sweat and horses, the hum of voices carrying prayers and oaths into the wind. There is no stone throne, only the grass, the sky, and the promise that together they are stronger than any city wall or distant empire. When the title is spoken Genghis Khan, it means not just ruler, but the center of the steppes' restless heartbeat. The name binds men who once rode alone into a single body that will ride far beyond the plains of Mongolia. Genghis Khan remains, at heart, a child of the camp. He sleeps beneath felt roofs, eats beside the same campfires as his warriors, listens to the wind scratch at the gar walls while his mind turns quietly, like a wheel in the dark. So when you hear his name in old books, the conqueror, the scourge, remember too the hush of the dawn before the horses wake, the soft rustle of felt walls, the steady breath of a leader who learned from the wind itself how to endure, how to bend, and when to break. As the embers fade and the warriors drift to sleep, the horses shift on the plain. Somewhere in the dark, a boy who was once Temujin might smile at how far his dreams have carried him. Dreams that began in hunger and silence and carried him to the edge of every map, carrying us gently toward the place where his power first took root, the hidden city that rose and fell among the grass. As you let the image of Temujin, the new Genghis Khan, fade softly into the rolling plains, imagine what rose next from that circle of tents and patient horses, a city not built of marble or high stone towers, but of quiet intention, resourcefulness, and a longing to bind together the vast spaces of the steppe. This city was called Karakoram, a name that once carried the promise of a capital at the world's crossroads, and now lingers half-buried beneath centuries of grass and drifting time. Picture yourself arriving there, not today, but long ago, your horse picking its way across the dusty tracks that lead to this sudden oasis of felt and timber and stone. Karakoram does not rise like the walled cities of Europe or the towering pagodas of China. Its beauty is simpler, woven together from practicality and the restless flow of people who gather here from every edge of the empire. At the city's heart stands a great wooden palace, not a fortress, but a meeting place. Some called it the Silver Tree for the fountain that sat within its courtyard. Crafted by captured artisans, a metal tree that streamed fermented mare's milk and sweet rice wine through its delicate branches, flowing into bowls held out by thirsty warriors and visiting dignitaries alike. Imagine the scent here, the mingled aromas of boiling mutton, burning dung fires, fresh-cut wood. Herds drift at the city's edges, grazing even as traders haggle over silk bolts and spices carried from Samarkand and beyond. Couriers dash in and out, messengers bearing news that must reach 1,000 scattered camps before the moon changes shape. The hum of Karakoram is not the hum of stone streets and crowded markets. It is softer, the lowing of cattle, the steady pounding of blacksmiths who craft arrowheads and horsebits, the murmured prayers of visiting envoys who watch the simple wooden gates with wary eyes. Beneath your feet, the ground is layered with quiet secrets. Long after the last Khan has ridden away, the winds will sweep dust over the carved stones, burying broken roof tiles, coins that once passed from Persian merchants to Mongol herdsmen, fragments of pottery painted with scenes of cranes and flowing rivers, all tucked under the same earth that still feeds the herds today. For the Mongols, Karakoram was never meant to be a prison of stone. It was a gathering point, a place to store tribute, to meet and decide where the next campaign might reach. When the council ended, the Khans and their warriors would break away again, folding up the city in spirit, if not in stone, carrying its wealth on horseback, ready to vanish into the grass whenever the world turned restless once more. Archaeologists who sift these fields now find hints of that old life: charred hearths, broken tools, shards of Chinese porcelain resting next to bones of sheep and goat. Each piece tells a whisper of a story: a caravan that arrived from far-off Persia, a craftsman from North China working under the broad steppe sky, a child who played in the dusty lanes before the camp moved on. Stand here a moment longer, your feet in the grass above the buried ruins. Let the wind move around you as it did for those long-vanished traders and smiths and horse lords. There are no high towers left to cast a shadow, but if you close your eyes, you might feel the thrum of hooves, the creak of cartwheels. Karakoram rose because Genghis Khan and his sons needed a heart for their empire, a pulse to send out riders in every direction. And when the pulse grew quiet, the earth reclaimed it, folding the past into its roots and grasses. If you listen closely, you may still hear it, a hidden echo beneath your feet, waiting patiently for curious hands to lift the soil away. And now, let us ride onward from these hushed ruins, beyond the city's simple wooden gates, to glimpse the quiet power that lay not in the common camp, but in the grand felt palaces and silken cloaks of the ruling Khans and their courts. Take another quiet step through these wind-swept fields, where the grass grows thick and the earth beneath your boots holds the weight of centuries. It is easy to pass by Karakoram today and see only empty pasture, horses grazing lazily in the summer sun, a few low humps where walls once stood. But if you close your eyes, the city breathes again, not loudly, but in a hush of voices and footsteps that once stitched the steppe together. Imagine yourself moving slowly through its narrow lanes. There are no paved streets like Rome, no canals like Venice, no marble columns like Constantinople. Instead, you find beaten earth paths lined with simple stalls, their awnings fluttering in the wind. A Persian merchant leans over a bolt of silk, his words soft as he barters with a local trader in a tongue you half understand. A boy carries a bundle of dried dung for the hearth, stepping carefully to avoid the herds that drift through town like living rivers. Here, nothing stands still for long. Carts rumble in and out through the city's wooden gates, rough-hewn planks lashed together with rawhide, painted with signs of the Khan's protection. Inside the city's open courtyards, foreign visitors gather. Chinese scribes with ink-stained sleeves record taxes and tribute. Traders from distant Baghdad warm their hands over braziers while they wait for an audience in the Khan's hall. At the very heart sits the great assembly hall, the palace that is not truly a palace. Its walls are wood and clay, built quickly yet carefully by craftsmen brought here from every conquered corner. within its walls. Decisions ripple outward like horsemen galloping into dawn. Decisions that will shape kingdoms half a world away. Outside that hall stands the fabled silver tree, a creation so strange and clever that even visiting European envoys wrote of it in wonder. Imagine its hollow branches, crafted by a captured silversmith, pouring streams of mare's milk, sweet kumi, rice wine, or honey mead at the touch of a hidden lever. No marble fountains here, only this glittering tree, a symbol of how the Mongols gathered the finest skills wherever they rode. Not far beyond the center, shrines and temples rise. Buddhists, Taoist, even Christian crosses brought by Nestorian monks. The Mongols welcomed all faiths so long as they did not stand in the way of tribute and loyalty. The soft murmur of prayers mingles with the creak of carts and the distant neighing of horses. In this city, belief travels as freely as trade caravans, carried in and out by the wind. As the sun slips lower, Karakoram changes again. The markets quiet, herds drift back toward the night paddocks. Fires flicker behind simple wooden walls. Within the gers, scattered at the city's edge, guards share bowls of sour milk and stories of faraway battles. An elder tells a child that this place will stand forever, though the elder knows, deep down, that the steppe devours all things that forget to move with it. And so, in time, the city fades, its halls crumble, its stone foundations sink back into the earth. The silver tree grows quiet, pulled down for scrap, its clever pipes scattered in the soil. Only the wind remains, the same wind that once carried riders to and from Karakoram, the same wind that brushes your hair now as you stand above its hidden veins. Beneath your feet lie coins stamped with the mark of the Great Khan. Broken ceramics painted in cobalt blue, scraps of iron from horse tack left behind by a careless guard. Beneath your feet, the echo of a time when this quiet patch of grass commanded voices from every corner of the known world. If you listen just a moment longer, you might hear a hoofbeat, faint but steady, a reminder that nothing here is truly gone, only waiting under the roots for the curious hand. The gentle brush of a trowel, the hush of a storyteller's voice to lift it back into the light. And when the whisper fades, you find yourself ready to drift once more, away from buried stones and hidden coins, toward the shimmering silk tents and fur-lined cloaks of those who ruled it all from within the hush. Let your mind wander now to the hidden circle within the vast Mongol world. The inner ring of khans and courtiers, whose soft voices and careful bargains shaped the thunder of armies and the calm hush of caravans alike. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a great encampment, larger than any village, yet as temporary as a bird's nest in the tall grass. Before you stretch rows of felt tents, some plain and modest, others towering, draped in silks brought by traders from distant Cathay, Persia, or Samarkand. Their canvas walls ripple in the cold wind, painted with signs that tell of the family within. A soaring falcon, a crouching tiger, a crescent moon. Near the camp's heart rises a larger ger, broad, heavy with thick felt, its roof poles painted bright red and blue. A guard in a fur-lined coat stands by the entrance, his eyes half closed but watchful all the same. Within sits a khan, a man draped not in a crown of gold, but in a coat of the finest sable, its dark fur catching the flicker of firelight. Step inside for a moment. The air within is warmer, thick with the aroma of boiled mutton and fermented mare's milk. Carpets from far-off cities soften the packed earth beneath your feet. Around the Khan kneel his close advisors, warriors whose hands still bear the rough scars of bowstring and bridle. Scribes who bend low over scrolls filled with flowing Persian script. Foreign envoys who bow carefully, measuring every word. The Khan does not rule alone. The camp's breath runs through him, but it is kept alive by the quiet hum of counsel. Every decision is weighed here. Who will ride east next season? Who will guard the caravan routes through the burning deserts? Who will collect tribute from distant hill tribes? Nothing is written in marble. Everything rests in spoken promises, oaths sealed with bowls of kumi passed hand to hand. Listen for a while to the gentle murmur of this court. A scribe reads out reports from the yam, the great postal relay that strings the steppe together like an invisible thread. A visiting merchant offers rare stones from India, hoping for favor. A captive craftsman kneels to present a delicate blade, its steel shimmering in the fire's soft glow. Beyond the felt walls, the courtiers drift between tents, their robes lined with fox fur, their boots stitched with patterns that speak of wealth carried on horseback. Some are warriors first, their daggers hidden under silk sleeves. Others are wives, mothers, and daughters, women whose whispered counsel bends the Khan's ear as surely as any blade. It is easy, in stories, to see only the clash of hooves and iron. But beneath that, thunder hums a quieter power. The power that sits cross-legged on thick rugs, pours steaming tea into shallow bowls, and listens more than it speaks. Among the Mongol nobility, rank is fluid, yet fiercely guarded. To dine at the Khan's table is both honor and test. One wrong word might see you sent back to the cold plain with nothing but your horse for warmth. One right word, spoken at the right moment, might carry your family's name on the lips of messengers, galloping from the frozen forests of Siberia to the rich markets of Baghdad. And yet, even here, in this circle of wealth and fine cloaks, the steppes' old lessons endure. A Khan's robe may be stitched with gold thread, but his power rests on riders who still sleep wrapped in wool beside restless herds. Should he lose their faith, the felt walls that warm him tonight can be pulled down by morning, leaving him a lone figure under an indifferent sky. Step back now from the warmth of the great Gur. Feel the cold bite at your cheeks again. Watch the courtiers slip from tent to tent, shadows drifting under moonlight. In the quiet distance, horses stand tethered, their breath rising like ghostly ribbons. The camp hums on a circle within a circle. The nobility's soft words send thunder rolling across distant kingdoms. Yet each voice begins here, in a tent of felt and flickering firelight. And as you drift further with the hush of these secret counsels, let us follow the quietest among them, the young ones learning the old ways, the future thunder still learning to ride, to hunt, to obey the wind. Now, let your thoughts drift to a smaller tent, pitched just beyond the grand felt walls, where the Khan and his advisors murmur over maps and trade goods. Here, the air is colder, the rugs thinner, the voices softer, for this is where the next generation waits, half awake before dawn, learning in the hush how to carry the old ways forward. Imagine yourself as a boy again, or perhaps a girl in a family that knows every pair of steady hands is needed. You rise with the pale light that brushes the steppe, your breath a faint cloud in the cold. Your mother wraps a strip of wool around your shoulders. Your father waits outside, bow in hand, horse already saddled. You are young, but on this wide plain, childhood does not linger. Your first lesson is always the horse. Even before you can stand firmly on your own legs, you learn to balance on a shaggy pony's back, feeling the gentle sway beneath you as the herd drifts across the grass. In time, you learn how to ride without saddle or stirrups, how to press your knees tight, how to trust the animal as you trust the wind. Next comes the bow, a small one at first, a child's version of the horn and sinew curve your elders carry. The string bites at your fingers until the skin toughens. Your breath slows with each draw. You learn to shoot from a standstill, then at a trot, then at a gallop. The arrow loosed in the hush between hoofbeats, the mark struck without thought. In the evenings, you squat beside the older boys, listening as they retell the great raids. How your grandfather's grandfather rode with Temujin himself. How a lone arrow changed a battle's course. How the thunder of hooves breaks down walls that once seemed unbreakable. You hear these stories until you can whisper them to the wind while you ride alone. Your chores are simple but endless. You help herd the goats and sheep, gather dung for the fires, mend tack with clumsy fingers until your stitches grow neat and strong. Each small task binds you more closely to this land, this wind-swept sea that has no fences, only distant horizons. Sometimes, on still nights, you crawl out of the gare and lie flat on your back beside your pony. Above you, the stars wheel in silence, clear and sharp. Somewhere, far away, your father stands guard over the herd, a dark shape blending into the night. The land feels vast, yet known, empty, yet alive with the soft pulse of hooves and wind. When a threat draws near, another clan's raiders, perhaps, or wolves sniffing at the edge of the herd, you do not run to hide. Instead, you stand beside your elders, arrow nocked, eyes wide but steady. You learn that courage is not loud. It is the quiet way you keep your feet planted when the shadows move. As you grow, your horse grows with you, hardy, stubborn, tireless. You brush its mane, check its hooves for stones, speak to it as you would a brother. You know its moods as you know the seasons, when it will fight the bridle, when it will carry you across rivers and hills without pause. One day, when your voice grows deeper and your shoulders broaden under thick wool, you will ride out with the other young warriors for your first hunt, or perhaps a small raid on a rival camp, not to conquer empires, not yet, but to prove that you can listen to the wind, feel the bowstring snap at the right moment, trust your horse to bring you safely home. This is how a warrior is shaped, not by royal birth or jeweled sword, but by dawns spent on the back of a pony, evenings spent by a dying fire, winters survived by tending herd and family, by learning that the land gives nothing freely but everything willingly to those who respect its hush. And when you drift to sleep inside your family's low, warm gare, the same wind that once whispered over Temujin's restless dreams sighs gently over you, carrying your breath into the long story of thunder that begins in silence. Linger here a little longer, where the dawn light grows brighter, but the camp remains hushed. Each figure wrapped in their own small circle of warmth and duty. Beside the boys who practiced with bows and ponies, other children learned different skills, quiet arts that hold the camp together when the men ride far away. You might see a sister kneeling beside her mother, fingers busy spinning coarse wool into yarn. Her small hands learn to weave felt covers strong enough to hold back the biting wind. She stirs a pot of milk, testing its sourness with the tip of her tongue, listening to her grandmother's soft stories of the old days, when Temujin was no more than a hungry boy with too much sky above his head. No one is idle here. From the smallest child to the eldest great-grandmother, each has a place in this drifting hive of felt and hooves. Even the youngest learn the quiet watchfulness that life on the steppe demands. A child old enough to toddle is old enough to carry a small bundle of dried dung to the hearth, or gather wind-blown twigs after a rare summer storm. In this wide land, the measure of wealth is not gold stacked behind walls, but the health of the herd, the strength of the horse, the steadiness of the family circle. Each lesson, whether learned at the side of the herd or by the low fireside, is a step along the same winding path. By the time a boy can draw his father's full-sized bow without wincing, or a girl can sew a tear in thick felt with neat, patient stitches, they carry the knowledge of countless generations in hands still soft with youth. Sometimes, on calm days when the wind sleeps and the sun is gentle, a father may ride out with his son or daughter at his side, guiding the small pony with an easy hand. They scan the horizon, pointing out tracks pressed into the damp earth, a stray goat, perhaps, or the paw prints of a wolf that circled too close in the night. These lessons do not come with loud praise or harsh rebuke. Instead, the steppe itself teaches. If you ride with your eyes closed to the wind's signs, you may return hungry. If you listen, really listen, the land whispers what it needs, where it hides its secrets. The junior warrior learns to feel each shift in the weather like a ripple under the skin. They know which clouds promise snow, which breeze brings dust from far-off deserts, which hush in the herd means a predator stirs in the dark. When a gathering is called, a small raid, a hunt, or the first true battle that will mark the change from child to man, the young ones slip among the older riders, careful and quiet. They check their gear, tighten saddles, test bowstrings by moonlight. There is no boasting here, no shouted songs, only the steady, soft rituals passed down like a low chant in the hush before dawn. And when they return, whether from a hunt that fed the whole camp or a skirmish that settled an old quarrel, they stand a little straighter at the edge of the firelight. Their shoulders carry not just the weight of quivers and blades, but the quiet pride of having joined the long story that began long before they were born and will roll on long after they lie down in the earth beneath the steppe. Later that night, the junior warrior sits beside the fire once more, half listening to the murmured voices of elders, half dreaming of wider horizons. Perhaps, as sleep curls around them, they picture themselves not as a single figure on a pony, but as one part of a thunderous wave, galloping across the world just as Temujin once did. And all the while, the wind moves softly across the grass, carrying this generation's quiet breath forward into the waiting dark. Now, let us slip gently from the circle of young riders to the quieter, yet no less powerful circle of those who hold the camp steady when the men are gone. The women of the steppe, whose soft words and steady hands shaped the Mongol world as surely as any bow or blade. Imagine the morning unfolding once more, the sun lifting higher above the endless grass. Among the clustered gears, you see women moving calmly from tent to tent, their fur-lined sleeves brushing against stacks of drying felt, their voices low but firm as they direct children, elders, and servants through the day's small labors. In the tales carried beyond the steppe, Mongol women are often invisible, shadows behind the thunder of horsemen. But here, among their own, they stand tall, queens and mothers, wives and sisters. Each carries knowledge, passed from mother to daughter, in an unbroken line, as enduring as the wind that wraps the camp. Imagine Bert, the first and most trusted wife of Temujin, the young woman who once waited alone while rival clans carried her away in the night, who returned to him as the mother of his eldest sons, who ruled the hearth and the herds when her husband rode to unify the clans. When the men were gone, Bert made sure the herds did not stray, that tribute was collected, that allies remained loyal through careful gifts and quiet letters sent with trusted messengers. In this world, power does not always shout, it hums beneath the surface, in the calm judgment of a mother who knows which dispute to settle with a word, and which to settle with a quiet threat. When the Khan is far from home, deep in campaign, the camp's breath rests in the hands of women like Bert, women who can balance a ledger as easily as a newborn, who can greet foreign envoys without flinching, who know how to promise loyalty without yielding freedom. Step inside a large ger now, the tent of a noble family whose husband rides with the main horde. Inside, you find women gathered in a soft circle. Some spin wool with long, practiced fingers. Others press new felt panels, their palms moving in a slow, rhythmic dance over the damp fibers. A pot of tea steams gently in the hearth's glow. They speak of small things, a horse's injury, the behavior of a stubborn goat, the whispered rumor that a rival wife plots to undermine a promise once made. Yet beneath these simple words lie the threads of an empire. Marriages, arranged at these hearths, linked distant clans in bonds, stronger than iron. Dowries flow, not only in cloth and horses, but in promises of loyalty, safe passage, and protection when the storms come. You see a grandmother, her hair bound in a neat braid, her eyes sharp despite her age. She remembers the days when Temujin's camp was no bigger than a single ring of gers. She reminds the young wives what must be done if trouble rides near, how to pack quickly, how to bury valuables just deep enough that no raider will find them, how to signal to neighboring families if the men do not return when promised. And beyond the nobles, countless other women keep the daily beat of life moving. They milk the mares, churn the kumi, tend the children, shape the thick felt that keeps the cold wind at bay. They gather wild herbs for healing salves, sew sturdy boots that carry warriors through snow and mud, mend armor that comes back dented and blood-spattered from distant battles. Their work hums on without boast or title, yet each quiet task knits the camp together, like threads pulled tight through heavy wool. Without them, there is no fire to warm the ger, no milk to fill the children's bowls, no shelter when the frost cuts through the open plain. Even the mighty Khans know this truth, that each dawn's first breath belongs not to the thundering riders, but to the quiet strength of the women who light the fire, saddle the ponies, and send the next thunder rolling into the distance. And so, when night returns and the camp folds itself into sleep, the softest voice often carries the final word. A mother hushes her children with old stories. A wife kneels beside the hearth, stirring the coals until they glow warm enough to last until dawn. A grandmother whispers a blessing that drifts upward through the smoke hole, joining the wind that has always carried the steppe's secrets far beyond its borders. Stay here a little longer in the hush between felt walls and flickering coals, where the camp's true pulse thrums beneath soft hands and watchful eyes. Beyond the warmth of the noble gare, you might step into a smaller tent at the camp's edge, where a young mother hums softly as she braids her daughter's hair by firelight. Her fingers move with patient care, weaving small charms of bone and beads into each twist of dark hair, tiny tokens against wandering spirits, tokens that remind the child she is watched over, even when the wind howls too loud to hear a mother's voice, to gather frightened children inside, to wrap precious belongings in oilskin against sudden rain. While warriors test their courage against rivals and wild lands, the women test theirs each day against hunger, drought, sudden illness that rides in with the wind. A wealthy wife might sit at the center of trade and gossip, her words carrying across camps through quiet messengers. A poorer herder's wife works in the same rhythm, though her sphere is smaller, tending the goats, scraping hides, darning the felt roof when the seams loosen with age. Each one carries the same lessons in her bones: patience when food grows scarce, cunning when a neighbor's promise turns thin, compassion for the weak, and iron resolve for those who threaten what she holds dear. You can see this hidden strength in the way she bargains with traders at the edge of the camp. No soft-hearted charity here. She knows the price of a well-fed mare, the worth of an iron pot, the cost of a length of silk when the next storm could wipe out half the herd. She may laugh lightly, pour tea with steady hands, but her eyes never leave the merchant's face until the last coin passes from palm to palm. And yet, for all this quiet steel, there is warmth too, warmth that holds the camp together when frost rimes the felt walls, or news comes of men lost far from home. Gathered around the hearth, the women share lullabies as old as the steppe itself. They remember stories from before Temujin, tales of fox spirits and mountain wolves, of wise grandmothers who spoke to the sky long before any Khan rode in triumph. When a birth comes, as they often do in the hush of night, the women gather without fuss. Older hands catch the new life, wrap it in felt, hush its first cries, so they do not wake the herd too soon. For a moment, the whole camp seems to pause, listening for the baby's first breath, trusting that this soft, fragile sound will grow strong enough to carry the line forward. In this way, new warriors are born not just on the battlefield, but beside the quiet hearth, beneath felt walls stitched by patient hands. Here, the next riders learn to open their eyes to the flicker of firelight before they ever open them to the sweep of sky. And when the men return, herds intact, tribute gathered, weapons dull with use, it is the women who greet them first, who measure the spoils, soothe the injured, and keep the stories alive, so that each triumph, each loss, folds into the larger memory that binds tent to tent, mother to daughter, family to the endless plain. Long after the Khan's name fades, the wind still carries these women's soft voices over the grass, the quiet, steady breath that gives the horde its spine and its heart. Slip now from the warmth of the felt walls and into the open night, where the wind hums low through the grass and the stars gather above you like scattered embers. Here, under this endless dome, the Mongol camp finds its oldest shelter. Not the Jur's felt roof, but the open sky itself. For all their thunder and conquest, the Mongols carried with them a faith that was older than any empire they would ever build. A faith woven not in stone temples, but in whispered words to the wind and the watchful hush of the heavens. Imagine standing at the edge of the herd as the last fire's smoke drifts away. In the quiet between hoofbeats, you might see a lone figure cloaked in heavy wool, standing with arms lifted wide. This is the shaman, keeper of songs, speaker of dreams, bridge between the earth beneath your feet and the blue vault above. In the Mongol mind, the world is not crowded with jealous gods in marble halls. Instead, it is vast and open, watched over by Tengri, the eternal blue sky, a presence more felt than seen, more trusted than feared. The steppes' hush is Tengri's hush. The winds that shape the grass are the same winds that shape a man's fate. When illness comes to the camp, or a dream troubles a warrior's sleep, the shaman is called. Beneath the felt roof, or out under the cold stars, the shaman hums low chants, the drum's soft pulse echoing a heartbeat. Smoke curls upward from burning herbs, juniper, dried grasses, strands of hair from a prized mare. The scent is sharp but clean, meant to guide the spirit's wandering path back to balance. Sometimes the shaman wears a coat heavy with iron charms, small bells, bone fragments, scraps of fur. Each piece carries a story, a promise of protection. As the drum's beat grows steady, the shaman's voice shifts, weaving old words into the night's wide ear. The watchers listen, their faces lit by the flicker of a single lamp. They do not interrupt. To speak now would be to break the invisible bridge between flesh and spirit. Children watch wide-eyed from behind their mother's shoulders. They see how the shaman's hands trace invisible lines in the air, how an old eagle feather brushes over a sick child's brow, how whispered prayers gather in the folds of the felt roof before drifting upward through the smoke hole into the patient sky. Not every prayer is for healing. Some are for the hunt, asking the hidden spirits of the plain to guide the horse's step, the arrow's flight. Others are for the herd, for the mares heavy with foal, for the sheep that wander to near a wolf's path. And some prayers slip into the hush without words at all, a quiet plea offered from heart to wind, from wind to sky. Yet this faith is not a prison. The Mongols welcomed many gods into their circle. Buddha, the Christian cross, brought by Nestorian monks, the holy words of Islam, carried by traders, riding with the caravans. The steppe has always been too wide to hold only one truth, but above them all, Tengri remains. The vast silence, the endless watchfulness, the reminder that no matter how far the horde rides, they are still but small shadows beneath a sky that never changes. When a Khan plans war or peace, he seeks the shaman's guidance. Beneath the silk cloaks and iron helmets, warriors still tie bits of blue cloth to their spears, small scraps meant to honor the sky that watches them ride. When they return, they thank not only their horses and bows, but the hidden spirits who kept them safe under the open dome. And when a rider breathes his last on a far-off field, he returns first to the earth, his bones mingling with the soil. But his breath, his last exhale, belongs to Tengri. It drifts upward like campfire smoke, a small thread woven into the endless wind. So, tonight, if you stand alone at the edge of the camp, the wind tugging softly at your sleeves, look up once more. The same stars that watched over Temujin's restless dreams, that flickered above shamans whispering old prayers, shine now above you, patient, unchanging. A promise that somewhere in this hush, the eternal blue sky still listens. Rest here a little longer, beneath this ancient blanket of stars, where the hush of the steppe is not empty, but alive with old breath and drifting prayers. You may see the shaman alone at dawn, long after the fires have burned low, standing at the edge of the camp where the grass lies pressed flat by the hooves of the night herd. The shaman's cloak shifts in the breeze, heavy with charms that catch the faintest rays of the rising sun, iron discs that chime when the wind leans in to listen. Closer now, you might hear the soft murmur of words that do not belong to any single tongue. They are pieces of many languages, borrowed, blended, carried on the backs of riders who brought foreign gods and new songs. The steppe is too wide for just one voice. It gathers them all, braids them together like a horse's mane. When a child falls ill, a mother waits by the fire. But it is the shaman who lifts the child's small hands to the first light of dawn, asking the sky to remember this fragile spark of warmth. If the child stirs, if the eyes open to the pale ceiling of the gur, the family breathes relief into the coals, trusting that the spirits have done their quiet work. Sometimes the shaman does not stand alone. In great gatherings, when a Khan prepares to ride against distant enemies, or when a new alliance binds scattered clans, the shamans gather to circling the fire with feathers and rattles, their voices layering like distant thunder. They speak to the spirits of the wind, to the hidden ones in the rivers and stones, to the ancestors who drift just beyond the reach of sight but never truly leave the camp's edge. Children watch from behind the safety of mothers' cloaks. They see how the flames bend when the drum's beat deepens, how the air shifts as if invisible wings pass overhead. They learn that the steppe is not only earth and sky, but something older, a space where breath and wind and memory weave together without end. Not all trust the shaman's word without question. Some warriors hold their own counsel, trusting more in bow and blade than in bone charms and whispered chants. But even they tie a strip of blue silk to their quiver, a small gesture that binds them to the open sky, the hush that no wall or fortress can hold back. And so, a kind of gentle balance lingers here. Faith that bends without breaking, belief that flows with the wind rather than fighting its restless path. This is why Buddhism finds room beside the old sky worship, why Christian prayers echo inside a felt tent, why a single line from the Quran might be recited by a trader whose ancestors once carried offerings to stone cairns on lonely hills. For the Mongols, the steppe is too wide to cling too tightly to any one path. They trust instead in the hush, the great hush that hums beneath hoofbeats, the hush that drifts upward with the smoke of the evening fire, the hush that holds their prayers like scattered seeds, waiting for the right wind. If you stand here long enough, you might feel it too. The quiet that listens when you speak no words at all. The hush that reminds you that beyond all thunder lies only sky, endless and soft, a patient dome beneath which all riders must someday rest. Now, let your mind drift away from the flickering smoke of the shaman's fire and follow a narrow trail. Beaten, smooth by countless hooves, a hidden thread that once bound the corners of an empire so wide it seemed to stretch from sunrise to sunset. This is the yam, the Mongol postal relay, a simple word for a vast network of riders, horses and lonely way stations that turned the hush of the steppe into a highway for whispers and commands. Imagine you are standing at one of these quiet posts, little more than a cluster of wooden huts and a fenced paddock where fresh horses doze beneath a sun that feels colder than it looks. The station keeper, wrapped in a thick coat, waits with watchful eyes, his ears tuned to the faintest tremor of hoofbeats far down the pale horizon. A rider appears, a small dot at first, then a shape hunched low over the neck of his horse. He carries no heavy armor, no fluttering banner, only a slender tube of oiled leather strapped tightly across his chest. Inside, a message that might shift the fates of kingdoms, settle the tribute of distant towns, or summon warriors to ride before the next moon rises. He swings down from his horse without ceremony, his mount, flecked with foam and panting, steam into the cold air, is led away to water and rest. Without a word, the station keeper points to a fresh pony already saddled, its mane brushed smooth and ears flicking impatiently at the wind. The new horse carries the message forward, strong legs pounding out another 30 miles before the next relay. Another hut, another keeper, another horse standing ready. Day or night, snow or blazing sun, the yam does not sleep. It breathes like the wind itself, a restless hush carrying news from Karakoram to China's old capitals, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the warm stone gates of Persia's cities. For the Mongols, conquest alone did not hold an empire together. Words did. Orders whispered through cold dawns, promises tied with knots of silk, warnings that flew faster than any army could march. The yam made this possible. The quiet web spun from hoofbeats and low-voiced keepers waiting at lonely posts. Picture the roads that never quite looked like roads. No cobbled highways or signposts, only the steppes, open face, marked here and there by the low roofs of relay stations and the thin trails pressed by countless hooves. The riders trusted the wind, the sun's arc, the angle of distant hills. They trusted the watchful eyes of hawks overhead, the hush that told them when raiders might lurk behind a dune or a line of willows. In the dead of night, the station glows like an ember in the vast dark, a small pool of warmth where a courier might trade his exhausted horse for a bowl of broth, his weary silence for a quick word with the keeper before vanishing again into the hush. No campfire stories here, no long rest. The message must move. The hush must carry on. Sometimes the messages were scraps of raw command, a Khan's word to gather tribute, summon soldiers, open the city gates when the thunder came. Other times they were lighter, invitations to distant guests, promises of marriage ties, trade routes to be protected, rumors of unrest to be hushed before they grew too loud. The yam's riders were not always warriors. Some were young boys just learning the steppes' secrets, small and quick on hardy ponies that could run for miles without tiring. Some were older men who knew every bend in the river, every patch of soft ground that might swallow a careless hoof. Each carried the same hush within them, the promise that words would move faster than any enemy's blade. In the end, when the Mongol Empire stretched thin and the great Khan's power frayed, it was the yam that lingered longest. Half-forgotten trails, ruined posts, hidden under grass. Old stories of hoofbeats that once carried the world's secrets from one lonely fire to the next. Stand here for a moment longer, beside the keeper's hut, listening to the wind that hums through the empty paddocks. The horses have drifted away, the riders long gone. But if you close your eyes, you may still hear it, the soft drum of hooves on frozen ground, the hush of secrets moving on a restless plain, the promise that a single voice can travel farther than any single rider could ever dream alone. Picture the station keeper's hands, rough and cracked from long winters spent feeding horses, mending tack, boiling simple broth for riders who arrive half frozen and gone again before the pot cools. His job is not glorious. He will not ride into legend beside great khans. Yet without him, the empire's vast web unravels strand by strand. At each station, a few ponies stand tethered close, their breath rising in ghostly threads against the pale sky. Mongol horses, small, broad-backed, patient. They know the road's hush better than any map. They graze when they can, sleep when they must, run when the message demands. Their hoofbeats drum out the yam's quiet heartbeat, carrying news across forests, deserts, mountains. Sometimes, a weary courier will slip a message to the keeper in silence, saying nothing more than a nod before curling up in a rough blanket by the fire's dying embers. For a few short hours, his dreams belong to him alone. Then he rises again, breath steaming in the cold dawn. His next horse already saddled and waiting, eyes clear, ears flicking at the wind. The messages these men carry are not all thunder and conquest. Some are simple ledgers, lists of tribute promised by distant tribes, tallies of sheep and horses, bolts of silk traded for strong iron. Some are news of a lost cousin found in a far-off camp, a family summoned to gather for a funeral beneath the eternal blue sky. Some are warnings, rumors of raiders stirring in the forests, whispers that a border chieftain's loyalty has begun to drift with the winter winds. And sometimes the messages never arrive at all. A sudden blizzard can bury both horse and rider in an indifferent drift. A band of thieves might wait by a lonely ford, listening for hoofbeats that carry secrets worth more than gold. Yet the system breathes on loss, woven into its quiet rhythm like a single missed heartbeat in an otherwise steady pulse. No one man controls the yam alone. It is too vast, too rooted in the land's hush and the people's breath. Each keeper teaches his son how to feed the horses, mend the worn saddles, bind a message so tightly that rain and snow cannot smudge its words. Each rider passes his knowledge to the next boy who slips onto a pony's back, small hands wrapped around the reins, eyes squinting into the rising dawn. From afar, you might stand on a lonely ridge and see nothing but grass and sky, a world unchanged for centuries. But if you watch closely, you might glimpse a rider, a dark speck skimming the edge of the plain, gone again in the blink of an eye, leaving only the hush and a faint trail of hoofprints pressed into damp earth. Long after the last great khans lay down their iron bows and the empire's borders crumbled into quarrels and forgotten treaties, the old posts lingered, huts left to ruin, fence posts leaning at soft angles, scraps of tack buried beneath drifting grass. Travelers would stumble upon them, see the hollow paddocks where ponies once snorted and stamped, feel the hush settle deep in the bones of the earth. And if they listened closely, they might hear the faint echo of the yam's promise, that on this vast, restless steppe, a single voice could travel farther than any wall could reach, carried not by thunder alone, but by the quiet trust of keepers who waited in the hush. Now, drift with me beyond the soft trails of the yam, farther west than the old heartland, where the hush of the steppe begins to brush against the rigid edges of stone castles and narrow forest roads. Imagine a small village in Hungary, the air damp with the scent of turned earth and wood smoke. In the fields, peasants bend over muddy rows of rye and barley. They do not know yet what approaches. They do not hear the first faint murmur that the thunder is no longer locked behind far mountains and empty plains. Of horsemen who ride without stopping, who ask no permission to cross rivers that once marked safe borders. To these distant kingdoms, the Mongols are still half legend. For years, tales drifted in on the slow wind of rumor, stories told by wandering merchants who spoke of a people who slept in, felt tense, whose warriors could loose arrows backward while galloping away, whose thunder rose and fell like a sudden storm that left the plains silent and smoking behind it. Now the rumors are no longer stories told by firelight. Now they come with real hoofbeats. Picture yourself standing at the gate of a small stone keep. A scout arrives, his cloak caked with frost and mud. He speaks quickly to the lord who waits in the torchlit hall. The words are simple, yet they turn the hush of the keep into something brittle. They are coming. No caravans, no embassies, no tribute collectors, just riders. So many that the ground shivers beneath them, the sky behind them stained with dust. The steppe riders do not drum war songs on bronze shields or shout their names before a siege. They arrive as the dawn does, quiet, unstoppable, filling the horizon with shapes that flicker and blur in the morning mist. To the knights of Europe, clad in iron and heavy mail, the Mongol warrior is a contradiction. He wears no shining armor, yet his bow can pierce through plate at 100 paces. He carries no banner of silk and gold, yet his horse moves like the wind, doubling back before the knights can raise their lances. When battle comes, it comes like a hush turning to a storm. Villages scatter. Stone walls that once held back lesser threats stand only until the first breach. The riders flow through like water, never lingering longer than needed, never burning more than is useful. They are not here to hold the land, only to sweep it clear, to test its strength, to mark it on a map that stretches farther each day. There is a strange respect to, whispered even in the cloisters and council halls of kings who once believed their borders were the edge of the world. Chroniclers, their quills scratching quietly at parchment, record the riders with a mix of horror and wonder. They write of tactics never seen before, feigned retreats, sudden flanks, arrows that fall like rain long before a sword can find its mark. Messengers flee west with trembling voices. They come without warning. They vanish without trace. They speak of a great Khan whose words reach farther than any king's. In town squares, common folk tell tales of monsters, half men, half beast, because the truth is harder to hold, that these are men not so different from themselves, born beneath the same sky, shaped by a land so wide it taught them to listen to the hush more than the roar. At night, when the campfires burn low, a quiet fear settles along the borders. Somewhere out there, just beyond the dark tree line or the rolling hills, the hush hums, again hoofbeats, carrying new orders. New scouts, moving like ghosts through the sleeping fields. And when dawn breaks, and a lone rider appears on a distant ridge, you see how Europe's old maps must change. The hush that began in Karakoram has found its edge. The stone walls that thought themselves eternal now hear the soft thunder that rolls across the steppe, carrying a reminder that even the strongest fortress must listen to the wind. At first, a farmer might pause, squinting against the sun's low glare, thinking them a passing herd. But the shapes do not scatter like animals. They move as one, gliding over the hills, slipping behind groves, and reappearing closer, always closer. A boy, clutching a bundle of kindling, is yanked inside by a trembling mother's hand. The fear is not loud yet. It is the hush of breath caught in the chest, the hush of footsteps on packed earth as families gather what little they can carry. For those behind stone walls, knights and lords, who polish their iron helmets and bless their banners in candlelit chapels, the stories feel distant, almost impossible. How can these riders slip past forests and rivers that have stopped other raiders for centuries? How can men, clad in felt and hide, bring ruin to stone keeps that have stood since ancestors first carved their names in church ledgers? Yet the truth hums through monasteries and royal halls alike. Riders appear where no roads lead. Their horses graze on frozen grass that local steeds would refuse. Their arrows come not in one sudden volley, but in waves, patient, methodical, a quiet rain that erodes a shield wall like water eating at stone. At night, in the timber houses of small towns, villagers whisper of scouts who pass unseen, ghost shapes whose footsteps leave no trail, but who always seem to know where the river fords lie, which paths stay dry when the spring floods come. Some swear they see shapes in the trees at dusk, small fires flickering, eyes watching from shadows that the local watchmen fear to enter. The chroniclers do not know what to call these strangers. Some scribble Latin words for Tartars, borrowing an older name once given to distant nomads. Some choose tatters, conjuring images of demons riding storms. But behind every half-wrong name lies the same hush, the knowledge that a quiet camp on the plain can rise up overnight into a force that rides farther, faster, more silently than any peasant's prayer can outrun. For the Mongols, this hush is their oldest ally. They do not ride in heavy columns that creak with wagons and clatter with banners. They flow like water through the spaces between rivers and trees. They fold themselves into forests that locals thought impassable. They appear in places where no gate was thought needed. Imagine standing atop a castle wall at dawn. The frost bites at your cheeks. The distant fields shimmer with a thin mist. And then you see them, small knots of riders on hardy steppe ponies, fanned out like hunters, testing the land's defenses. They do not rush in with the brash noise of old raiders. They drift closer, then fade away again, never too near, never too far, always watching. Inside the keep, the Lord's men argue by torchlight. Should they sally out? Should they wait behind stone walls and trust that the hush will pass them by? Some counsel parley, send a gift, promise tribute by another winter of uneasy sleep. Others polish their blades and mutter that no steppe horseman can breach stone if the gates stay strong. Yet the hush has patience. When the moment comes, it comes as softly as dusk. A single horn's call, the low chant of riders gathering just beyond the tree line. Then the arrows begin to whisper against the walls. Not a great roar, but a steady tapping, finding every weakness, each unpatched seam, each careless watchtower. In the aftermath, the hush drifts on, leaving behind burnt rafters and footprints pressed deep into muddy fields. The villagers tell their stories to traders who carry them west. The scribes copy these rumors onto thin parchment and send them riding in all directions. The kings listen, heads bowed over maps that suddenly seem too small to hold back so much empty sky. The same hush that warms the hearth is the hush that sweeps through distant kingdoms, carrying a reminder that no wall is high enough when the wind rides with the horsemen. Now, Breathe out the chill of castle walls and fear. Let your mind drift south and east, where the old roads snake through deserts and mountain passes, the ancient trails that carried silk and spices, long before the first Mongol hoof ever pressed their dust. This is the Silk Road. Not a single road, but a web of narrow paths winding from the green valleys of China through vast deserts, snowy passes, and oases where date palms rise from dry earth like soft promises of water and rest. Long before the Mongols, these trails were dangerous arteries for merchants and pilgrims alike. Bandits lurked behind wind-carved ridges, small kingdoms demanded bribes at every gate, and feuding cities could choke off a trader's fortune with a single closed gate. But when the Mongols came, they brought with them not only thunder and fear, they brought something rare and unexpected, safety of a sort. For in the hush that followed conquest, new laws spread across the plains, deserts, and cities. Laws written not in stone, but carried on horseback, spoken in many tongues, but enforced with a quiet certainty that few dared test. Picture a caravan snaking its way through the dry hush of the Taklamakan, dozens of camels laden with bales of raw silk, bolts of brocade, lacquered chests filled with jade, and fine porcelain wrapped in layers of soft straw. At the caravan's head, a merchant rides high on a sturdy Mongol pony, his eyes shaded by a broad hat, a folded pass tucked safely into his sash, a pass marked with the seal of the Great Khan. This pass is not mere paper, it is a promise. Along the trail, at every watchpost and guarded oasis, Mongol officials inspect it with care, nodding to the caravan's leaders, waving them onward, sometimes offering fresh mounts or guards for the next dangerous stretch. In return, the traders pay their taxes, a careful share of silk, spices, coins, or news. For news was a currency the Mongols prized nearly as much as gold. Where once rival kingdoms squeezed every coin from weary traders, now the steppes' hush opens a corridor of relative calm. Merchants travel farther than they dared before, their goods crossing continents under the same watchful system that carried the Yam's secret messages. Fortified posts that once held only tired horses, now house patrols, ready to scatter bandits who test the new order. In the great cities that rose beside these roads, Samarkand, Bukhara, the crossroads of Persia and China, the Mongol tax collectors sit in shaded courtyards, counting bolts of silk and weighing bags of pepper and saffron. They work not with harsh shouts, but with ledgers and scribes, who mark down each tribute, each toll, each careful promise that trade will flow freely, so long as respect flows back. And so the empire grows rich, not only on conquest, but on movement. A soft tide of coins and spices drifting into treasury chests, feeding the Khan's far-flung courts. Traders bring not only goods, but ideas, paper, printing, languages, maps. They bring stories, too, rumors that slip into the hush of felt tents, where courtiers whisper of distant cities, of wonders and secrets worth sending new riders to claim. Yet, even in this tradefed.com, the hush holds a reminder. The Mongols' gift of safety is never free. Those who break their laws find no stone court to plead in, only a quiet judgment, swift and final, as quick as a bowstring's snap beneath the open sky. For the wise merchant, though, this order is a blessing. His camels plod forward under bright stars, his wheels creak softly over dry earth. His mind drifts to the coins he will count in some far bazaar where languages mix like spices in an open stall. He knows that for every toll he pays, the road itself stays open, guarded by the same hush that once toppled walls, but now protects the soft secrets, bundled inside his saddlebags. When dusk falls over the caravan's camp, traders gather by small fires, sipping bitter tea, exchanging stories of weather, border taxes, the price of silk in Venice, the cost of pepper in Cairo. Above them, the same sky watches, patient, unchanged, the silent witness to thousands of miles of profit and promise carried under the mark of the Khan. See how the merchants sit cross-legged by a small fire, their faces half-lit by embers. They speak in many tongues, Persian, Turkic, Chinese, but under the Mongol seal, these words flow together like streams feeding a single river. The fire pops gently as they pass small cups of tea. Watch the flicker of sparks rise toward the same sky that watches the steppe. Along the trail, small signs of Mongol order appear where none existed before. A rough wooden sign, carved with runes and marks, tells a weary rider where the next well lies buried under drifting sand. At a lonely way station, a guard sits beneath a felt awning, polishing the iron tip of a spear that once served in conquest, but now stands ready to scatter bandits from the shadows. The taxes paid here are not merely coins handed over at a dusty checkpoint. They are promises, small slices of profit that slip quietly into the Khan's treasury, feeding not only armies but the posts that guard the roads, the scribes who record each bolt of cloth, the messengers who ride ahead to warn of closed passes or dangerous floods. And so the roads breathe easier than they have in centuries. Bandits still watch from hidden gullies, but they watch carefully now, for word travels faster than any stolen treasure. If a band of thieves cuts down a caravan, a yam rider carries the news through the hush, and before the bandits can slip into distant dunes, horsemen come in the hush of dawn, their bows ready, their justice swift and silent. Yet the traders themselves carry their own small hush, a trust that the road is safer here than anywhere else. They know that under the Khan's wide reach, the same hoofbeats that once carried arrows now carry silver and silk, jade and pepper, rare furs wrapped in waxed cloth against the dust. Pause with them at one of the great markets that bloom like oases along this vast road. Samarkand, bright with blue-tiled domes that shimmer in the sun. Bukhara, where narrow alleys hum with whispered bargains. Kashgar, where Persian rugs lie beside Chinese porcelain, where Mongol guards stand watch at the gates, their eyes drifting from spice sellers to scribes tallying coin. Here, the hush is thicker, wrapped in the slow patience of traders who know each day the road brings new faces, new offers, new debts to settle. At dusk, the city gates close with a deep wooden sigh, but inside, the bazaar still murmurs, lamps swinging above stalls where gold dust is weighed on small iron scales, where soft bundles of raw silk pass from palm to palm. A trader counts his coins by lantern light. He knows how much has been handed over at each post. He knows the price is fair enough, for without this quiet order, his journey would stop 100 miles ago. His camels lost to brigands, his silver scattered in the dunes. And so he accepts the tax, the tribute, the soft hush of Mongol rule that wraps around him like a felt cloak at dawn. For every coin he pays, another rider stands ready on some distant hill, bowstrung, eyes searching the wind for danger that might flicker like fire from the dark, long after the empire's borders fade. the old trails remain, threads spun across deserts and mountains, carrying the memory of an age when conquest and commerce moved as one, when hoofbeats carried not just thunder, but prophet, promise, and stories that drifted farther than any single caravan could see. Tonight, as the fires burn low along the road, the traders sleep under felt blankets, their heads pillowed on bundles of goods bound for far cities they have never seen. Above them, the stars trace old paths, patient, unmoving. The same soft hush that cradles the step cradles them too, promising that for now the road remains open and the world drifts quietly on beneath the Khan's mark. Settle back now. Let your mind leave the caravan's dust behind and return to the open steppe, to that wide sea of grass where the wind hums low and the hush is broken only by the soft, patient snort of a hardy pony waiting beneath an endless sky. If the yam was the whispering web and the silk road the flowing artery, then the horse was the living muscle that carried it all. Without the horse, there would be no thunder rolling out of Karakoram, no empire stitched together by hoofbeats and quiet trails. The horse was not a tool to the Mongol. It was a companion, an inheritance, a warm promise of survival in a land where nothing stood still for long. Picture the Mongol horse now, smaller than the tall war horses of Europe, stocky and round-bellied, its coat thick enough to shrug off the winter wind. Its mane tangles in the cold breeze, its breath drifts like smoke. Its hooves know the grass so well they seem to remember where water hides beneath the dry crust of the earth. For the Mongol rider, this animal is more than transport. It is warmth when the nights bite through felt coats. It is food when the herd grows thin. For mare's milk, turned sharp and lively as kumis, is a meal as much as a drink. It is the hidden heartbeat beneath every raid, every trade route, every whispered word that crosses mountains and deserts alike. Imagine a warrior waking at dawn, brushing frost from his cloak. His first glance is to the pony tied close to the gare. He runs a careful hand along its flank, checks its hooves for burrs, its bridle for wear. In the hush before he stirs the fire or drinks the last of yesterday's milk, he sees in that small, sturdy animal the soft promise that he can go anywhere, anywhere at all, so long as hooves carry him true. Unlike the stabled steeds of Europe's castles, the Mongol horse does not live behind high gates or eat grain in stone barns. It grazes freely on the open plain, nibbling tough grasses buried beneath snow, finding its own drink in frozen streams and half-hidden springs. It grows strong, not in luxury, but in the same patient hush that shapes the rider beside it. A single Mongol warrior does not ride just one horse. He rides 5, 10, a small moving herd. When one tires, another waits, ready and strong. This simple pattern, swapping mounts mid-ride, letting a tired horse graze while another runs, is the secret behind the thunder that rolls so far, so fast. Other armies march on foot, wheels creaking under siege towers. The Mongol army drifts like breath, like wind, carried on ponies that never seem to slow. When battle comes, the horse is more than muscle. It is shield and partner both. The warrior shoots from its back, twisting at a full gallop to loose arrows behind him, beside him, ahead of him. The horse feels each shift of weight, each silent signal, and bends to its rider's will without harsh bit or spurred heel. In the hush of camp, these same horses stand tethered close by. Children learn to ride before they learn to read, if they ever learn letters at all. Even the smallest child finds a friend in the shaggy pony that will one day carry him or her into hunt, raid, or trade. When storms come and herds scatter, families ride out under dark clouds, calling softly into the wind to gather their horses back before the hush turns dangerous. And when a horse dies, as all living things do, its bones lie clean beneath the open sky. Its spirit returned to the hush that shaped it. Its hide warms boots and saddles. Its hair twists into ropes and bowstrings. Its memory lingers in the gentle way a young boy runs his hand along a new pony's mane, feeling for the old echo beneath the fresh coat. So much of this empire, so much of the hush and the thunder alike, rests on these sturdy backs. The yam courier's tired eyes, the merchant's safe caravan, the warrior's sudden raid, the quiet gathering at a distant corral-tie, all carried forward, mile by mile, hoofbeat by hoofbeat. In the end, the stepp's greatest secret is not the hidden message or the iron bow, but this simple truth: trust the horse, listen to the hush, and no wall, no border, no distant capital can stand still for long. Now, drift away from the open plain for a while. Follow the quiet hoofbeats as they slip from the hush of grass into the narrow streets of cities that once thought themselves safe behind stone and gate and guarded wall. The Mongols knew the hush and the thunder both, how to drift unseen when needed, and how to arrive like a storm when the time was right. To a lonely camp in the steppe, a city was a promise. Tribute to gather grain to feed the horses, wealth to roll like silk into the Khan's waiting coffers. Imagine a city now, somewhere on the edge of the Silk Road, perhaps Samarkand, bright under the desert sun, with its blue-tiled domes and high walls that shimmer with the heat of noon. Traders shout in narrow alleys. The smell of roasting meat drifts over courtyards where fountains flicker in the hush. Within these walls, scribes bend low over ledgers, counting coins that slip from one merchant's hand to the next. When the riders appear on the far horizon, the city stirs, not yet afraid, but watchful. Scouts hurry back with breathless tales of horsemen who appear and vanish like mirages. Envoys slip out through half-hidden gates, carrying careful gifts, gold coins, bolts of silk, promises written on parchment, sealed with fragile wax. Sometimes that hush is enough. The Khan's riders take the tribute, accept the promise, and the city's gates stay standing. Traders keep trading. The fountains run clear, washing the dust from tired hands. The hush moves on, satisfied, leaving the city to its soft hum of profit. But not always. Sometimes a promise is broken. Tribute promised but hidden away. An envoy detained too long behind a locked gate. A proud ruler who misreads the hush for weakness. Then the hush changes. It thickens. Riders circle the walls at dawn, testing the watchtowers for cracks. The city's defenders stand high on their battlements, their armor glinting in the sun, trying not to listen too hard to the stories carried by frightened traders. Stories of other gates that once held, then fell like dry wood under an axe. Siege begins not with roaring engines, but with patient silence. The Mongols wait. They build their camps just out of arrows' reach. They send scouts to find hidden wells, weak gates, frightened guards. They send words ahead of arrows, offers of mercy in exchange for an open gate. Sometimes the offer is taken. Sometimes the hush is met with defiance. Then the thunder comes. Engines appear like ghosts, crafted from timber, dragged across miles of plain. Stones fly, fire follows. Where once only hoofbeats hummed, defenders shout, but the riders wait, circling, watching for the single breach that turns hush to ruin. When the city falls, the hush returns again, swift, cold, and efficient. Tribute is gathered, grain is carted away. Those who resisted too long pay the price, yet often the walls remain, the markets reopen, the fountains flow once more. New rulers, now watchful behind new seals, pressed into clay tablets. Sometimes the same city rises again, stronger than before, its gates rebuilt, its markets richer, its people remembering that the hush can befriend or ruin, depending on how it's welcomed. In time, Samarkand thrives again. Bukhara hums with scholars and traders. Old scars fade beneath new tiles and fresh paint. Other places never breathe again. A stubborn fortress left to crumble. A rival city erased so that the hush might carry only loyalty forward on its next ride. In this way, the Mongols teach the cities of the world a simple lesson. The hush is patient, but never soft. It flows around stone walls, slips through bribes and promises, waits for the moment when silence turns to thunder, then settles back into silence again. Stand here a while, at the edge of a battered gate. See the stones piled for a new tower. Hear the quiet voices of masons setting fresh bricks where arrows once fell. Smell the dust of ruin drifting into the same warm air that carries the scent of new bread, new cloth, new coins counted in shaded courtyards. The hush never truly leaves. It hums in every rebuilt gate, every scribe's careful line, every soft promise traded beneath the Khan's watching sky. Stay here a little longer at the broken gate where the hush gathers like dust in the cracks. Imagine how the city breathes again, even as ash settles into old mortar, even as traders sweep clean the courtyards where arrows once struck walls in the hush of dawn. A city is more than stone and gate. It is voices, wheels creaking under heavy loads, spices lifting on the breeze. It is prayers whispered in hidden rooms, while watchmen scan the walls for signs of riders drifting like shadows across the plain. When the Mongols arrive, the hush comes first, an envoy at the edge of the walls. His coat rough with dust from miles of riding, his horse's flanks dark with sweat. He does not shout threats, he does not boast of thunder. Instead, he asks for tribute in a voice no louder than the wind that flickers banners above the gate. Inside the city, the rulers argue in candlelit rooms. Some see the hush for what it is, a chance to open the gates, to pass coins through patient hands, to trade stone for time. Others stand tall in their pride, convinced that their towers, their deep wells, their soldiers lined on high battlements can silence a hush born on the steppe. For a while, it seems they might be right. Siege engines, built by carpenters from distant lands, creak and groan outside the walls, but the stone holds. The defenders shout insults from the ramparts. They loose arrows down into the hush below. The hush absorbs these arrows the way the plains drink rain. No roar, no sudden rush, just quiet patience, steady and certain. Then, somewhere in the hush, a gap appears. A tired guard opens a small gate at dusk, tempted by a bribe or driven by fear. Or a tunnel is dug beneath the stones where the mortar crumbles from years of quiet rain. Or hunger does the work arrows could not, and a starving citizen slides open a bolt to let the thunder in. When the breach comes, it comes all at once. The hush breaks like a drum struck too hard, hooves pounding on packed earth, boots crunching over broken doors, fire licking at beams that once held up the wealth of guilds and scribes. Yet, even here, the Mongols' thunder is not wild chaos. It is precise, calculated, a storm that sweeps through and moves on. They gather the spoils, spices, coins, fine textiles, folded into neat bundles. They pull down banners, burn what they must, then fold the hush back over the ruin like a blanket of quiet ash. And what survives? Sometimes only bones beneath charred beams. But more often, something softer endures, a merchant's hidden stash of silver. A potter's kill half buried in the garden behind a broken wall. A cluster of families who emerge when the hush drifts onward, sweeping their courtyards clean with bristle brooms made from willow twigs. These survivors rebuild. They stack fresh bricks on old foundations. They gather broken tiles and set them in new mosaics that glimmer beneath the same sun. They trade again, this time under the Khan's mark, their caravans rolling safely along roads kept clear by the same riders who once brought thunder to their gates. And so, the cities learn a new kind of hush, not the silence of ruin, but the quiet hum of tribute, of coins counted in shaded courtyards, of gates swung wide before the riders need to circle them again. Some cities thrive in this hush. They become way stations where yam riders rest, where merchants change horses, where tax collectors tally tribute beneath painted eaves. Samarkand gleams under new tiles. Bukhara's minarets lift their calls to prayer once more, their stones warmed by the same sun that touched their ruins years before. Others vanish. Their names slip from ledgers. Their gates sink into drifting sand. Their towers crumble to wind and time. The hush covers them gently. No roar, no lament, only grass growing over cracked courtyards where once coins clinked and voices called the faithful to prayer. In this way, the Mongols teach every city a lesson, written not in ink, but in hush and thunder, both. Survive by listening, by bending before the wind's breath, by opening gates before they break. Those who learn this hush linger long after the last hoofbeat has drifted away into the open plain. And when you stand on these old stones today, among fallen arches or rebuilt domes, you can feel it still. The hush that hums in every crack, the soft echo of hoofbeats, long faded but never quite gone, waiting beneath the earth for the next story to ride through the gate. Now imagine the hush that once moved like breath across the steppe, carrying riders, secrets, tribute, and thunder from sunrise to sunset. Picture how over time that same hush grows thin, stretched too far, tugged at its seams by old grudges, new ambitions, and the restless weight of distance. No empire, however swift or silent, holds forever. Even the Mongol horde, born from the wind and carried by hoofbeats, found its edges in the hush of its own vastness. Imagine a map spread out on a low wooden table in a Khan's felt tent. At first, the lines are simple, circles of influence growing wider with each new raid, each new tribute gathered, each yam post built on lonely plains. Riders flow from Karakoram to China's walled cities, Persia's golden courts, Europe's uneasy forests. The hush rolls outward, unstoppable. But as the generations pass, new Khans rise from the children of Temujin's children. Some remember the hush that binds them, the breath of the eternal blue sky that once whispered unity into a single campfire circle. Others dream of carving out their own circle, their own hearth, their own title, to stamp on coins and tribute. The vast empire splits like a river finding too many paths through soft earth. The golden horde rides west toward the forests of Rus and the icy rivers that cut through dark pines. The Ilkhanate settles in Persia's warm valleys and busy markets. The Chagatai realm stretches its hush across Central Asia's dusty roads. Far to the east, the Yuan dynasty rises in China. A Khan wearing silk robes and jade seals while still claiming the open steppe as his birthright. At first, the yam still runs, couriers carrying news between distant cousins who call each other brother, even as their camps drift apart. Traders still trust the hush that guards the Silk Road. Tribute still rolls in, coins, silk promises that link stone cities to felt tents. But cracks widen. Quarrels simmer where once a single word settled disputes. Envoys who once brought calm now bring grudges wrapped in soft threats. Rival clans bristle at tribute demands, testing how far they can drift from Karakoram's memory. Sometimes the hush tears because of distance alone. A message carried across 1,000 miles of steppe might take weeks to arrive. Enough time for a local governor to listen to his own ambitions rather than the Khan's distant command. A yam station, once lively with fresh horses, grows quiet as roads shift and new traders choose safer routes. A caravan pays its tax twice, then refuses the third toll, slipping away under the protection of a new local ruler. And so, piece by piece, the hush frays. Some parts linger longer than others. The golden horde hums with strength for generations, gathering tribute from icy forests and river towns who remember the thunder well enough not to resist. The Ilkhanate courts Persian scholars and traders, weaving Mongol hush into local custom until the old lines blur. But even the strongest branch of this great tree finds rot at its roots. Feuds over inheritance, whispers of betrayal, rumors of plots drifting through the same felt tents that once hummed with loyalty. Old rivalries flare like grass fires in the dry wind. Meanwhile, the world beyond the hush learns its secrets. The cities build stronger walls. Armies adapt. Cavalry that once scattered before Mongol arrows learn the same tricks, build their own mounted thunder. The Silk Road shifts under new rulers who offer their own hush. Taxes paid not to Karakoram but to local Khans who care little for the old order. In time, Karakoram itself fades, its wooden halls falling silent, its stones buried under drifting grass and patient soil. New centers rise elsewhere, their hearths warm but their words no longer binding all riders to a single breath beneath the blue sky. Yet the hush does not vanish completely. It lingers in the roads that remain clear long after the yam grows quiet. It drifts in the shape of saddles, bows, sturdy ponies still bred on the same wide plain. It hums in stories told in distant lands of a time when a single word could summon riders who crossed continents before dawn fully woke the sky. Stand here now, at the edge of this unraveling. Feel how the hush softens into memory, how the thunder sinks beneath the patient grass, leaving only faint trails pressed into earth that remembers everything. Stay here a while longer at the fraying edge of empire, where the hush that once wrapped a single campfire now struggles to bind fires scattered across deserts, mountains, and half-forgotten roads. Picture the Khans of old sons and grandsons of Temujin, sitting cross-legged inside their great felt halls. maps spread wide before them. A flick of the hand marks where new tribute must come from. A nod sends riders galloping into distant forests. A whispered word settles quarrels before they grow teeth. But now, that same map grows too wide for any one voice to reach every corner. One Khan sits in Persia's warm stone courts, wrapped in silk, drinking tea brewed from leaves carried on the same roads that once trembled under his grandfather's hooves. Another Khan sits in a painted palace in China, his court heavy with scribes and merchants who speak soft words in many tongues. But not all share the same hush that once drifted through a single felt gare under the blue sky. Between them lie new borders, invisible yet solid. The riders who once carried secrets and tribute now carry warnings. News of small betrayals, rumors of cities testing the hush to see if it can still hold them. Sometimes they arrive too late. A local warlord has already sealed his own roads, claiming the Yam stations for himself. A village once loyal slips its tribute into hidden vaults, paying a new master who promises protection closer and quicker than a distant Khan's weary envoys. The old web of alliances tangles on itself. What once was simple loyalty, sealed by a bowl of kumi and an oath spoken in a hush only the wind could hear, now drifts into paper treaties and uneasy bargains struck in palace halls far from the plain. The more they write, the less they trust. The more they speak, the less they listen to the hush that once asked so little but gave so much. Outside these halls, the horses still graze. The children still learn to ride before they walk steady on their own legs. But the camps grow smaller. Small chieftains claim bits of the herd, bits of the hush, bits of the old thunder. Sometimes they rise, bold men and women hoping to bind it back together. Sometimes they fall, arrows loosed in the dark, quiet assassins who settle old feuds with no witness but the wind. In China's wide valleys, the Yuan dynasty rises tall for a while. Emperors on silk cushions, who still wear the mark of the great Khan, but rule through courtiers and ink more than bow and hoof. They build stone walls, raise taxes, polish court rituals that grow heavy with ceremony. For a time, it works, but the hush that once drifted free under the open steppe does not settle easily inside stone palaces. Rebellions bloom like spring grass, soft at first, then stubborn and thick, rooted deep in lands that do not forget their own hush. Far to the west, the golden horde hums longer than most. They gather tribute from forest towns, where rivers freeze half the year and wooden forts stand. Watch against wolves and rival princes, but even there cracks appear. Rival clans tug at the same taxes. Alliances splinter like thin ice under too many feet, and always the roads shift. The yam posts that once rang with hoofbeats and low fires stand empty now, roofs caved by snow, paddocks choked with weeds. A few stubborn keepers linger, warming their hands over small hearths, listening for riders who no longer come. They pass the old stories on to sons and daughters, who stand guard over trails that drift slowly back into grass. In time, new traders find new paths. Ships braving salt winds bring silk and spices across oceans that no hoof can gallop across. Cities that once bent their knee to felt tents learn new ways to guard their gates, new treaties to sign with distant kings who know little of the hush but plenty of coin and cannon. Yet, for all this fading, the hush does not vanish completely. It settles quietly into the bones of the plain. It breathes in the old saddles passed down from father to son. It hums in lullabies, sung to children who still dream of ponies waiting in the dawn. It drifts through ruined posts and half-buried coins, waiting for curious hands to lift it back into the light. If you stand on that wide plain at dusk, feel the hush wrap around you like an old blanket. Listen for the faint echo of hoofbeats rolling out beneath the sky so wide it still carries Temujin's breath in its cold, patient wind.